By 1884, you could walk for 100 miles across the American plains and never lose sight of bones. White, sun-bleached, stacked like snowdrifts. 60 million buffalo had roamed this land a generation earlier. Now, there were maybe a few hundred left alive. And the strange part? The US Army didn't just allow this. Some officers openly hoped for it. How did the death of an animal become a weapon of war? And why did that decision still shape native nations today? This is the story of the Great Plains, roughly 1800 to 1890. The buffalo, or properly, the American bison, wasn't just food for the Lakota, Comanche, Blackfeet, and dozens of other nations. It was economy, religion, and survival, stitched into one animal. Every part had a use: hide for shelter, bone for tools, sinew for thread, dung for fuel. Entire calendars were built around the herd's migration. So when the buffalo disappeared in barely 20 years, it wasn't a wildlife story. It was an attack on a way of life. If history has a hidden side, that's exactly where you'll find us. We're building a home for stories like this, and your subscription helps make that possible. So if you'd like to be part of that journey, subscribe. Now here is the first hook, and it surprises most people. It wasn't native hunters who caused the collapse. For centuries, Plains nations hunted buffalo sustainably, driving herds off cliffs, using every part of the animal, and taking only what communities needed. Historians estimate native hunting pressure barely dented a population that may have exceeded 30 million animals. The real shift began with horses and guns, introduced by European contact, which made hunting easier, but even then, populations held. The collapse needed something else entirely: industrial demand. That something else arrived in the 1870s, a European tanning process that turned tough buffalo hide into durable industrial leather, perfect for machine belts and boots. Suddenly, buffalo hides were worth real money in cities like New York and London. Professional hunters flooded the plains. Men like Tom Nixon reportedly killed over 100 buffalo in a single stand, barely moving his feet, picking off a herd that didn't understand the danger came from a mile away. Here's the number that stuns people. In the decade after 1872, an estimated 4 million buffalo were killed every single year at the peak, not for meat, but for hides. The carcasses were left to rot on the plains, sometimes hundreds at a time, while the tongues, considered a delicacy, and the hides were shipped east by rail. This is where the story stops being just about economics though, because US military and political leaders noticed something. General Philip Sheridan, who led military campaigns against Plains nations, allegedly told the Texas legislature that hide hunters had done more to defeat the Indians in 2 years than the regular army had in 30 because they were destroying the Indians' commissary. Whether or not Sheridan's exact words survive accurately in every retelling, the sentiment was real and widely shared among military leadership. Destroying the buffalo meant destroying the ability of Plains nations to resist relocation onto reservations. That's the turn. What looked like a hunting industry was, for the government, also a military strategy, one that didn't require a single shot fired at a person. For the Comanche, Kiowa, and Lakota, the effect was almost immediate. Communities that had built entire seasonal rhythms around the herds now faced starvation. Some nations tried to adapt, shifting toward more agriculture or negotiating for government rations. But rations were inconsistent, often late, sometimes spoiled. Historians pointed out that this wasn't incompetence alone. In several documented cases, withholding food was used deliberately to pressure resistance. Yet the story resists a simple villain narrative here too. Not every hide hunter was thinking about warfare. Many were just chasing profit in a lawless boomtown economy, indifferent to the political consequences. And not every government official supported the extermination. Some army officers and even some congressmen argued for protecting the herds, worried about ecological collapse, or, in a few cases, genuinely concerned for native survival. Congress actually passed a bill in 1874 to protect buffalo from overhunting, but President Grant refused to sign it. By 1884, the wild buffalo were functionally gone. Not just reduced, gone. One frontier naturalist searching the plains that year reportedly couldn't find a single wild herd worth documenting. The animal that had defined a continent's grassland ecosystem for thousands of years had nearly vanished in the span of one adult lifetime. For Plains nations, this collapse coincided with and accelerated forced relocation onto reservations, a process already underway through treaties, broken treaties, and military campaigns like the ones following Custer's defeat at Little Bighorn. Losing the buffalo removed the last practical alternative to dependency on the reservation system. Oral traditions across multiple nations describe this period not just as hunger, but as a kind of grief, losing a relative, not just a resource. Now here is the twist that gives the story its ending, and it's one most people don't expect. The buffalo's survival and the beginning of its slow return came from an unlikely partnership. In the late 1800s, a small number of ranchers, and notably several native individuals, including members of the Blackfeet and Pend-Oreille nations, working through figures like Samuel Walking, Coyote, and later the conservation efforts tied to Michel Pablo and Charles Allard, began quietly gathering and protecting small remnant herds. Some of these animals became the genetic foundation for nearly every buffalo alive today, including the herds now managed by tribal nations themselves. That's the real reversal. Today, more than 20,000 buffalo are managed by native nations through organizations like the Intertribal Buffalo Council, representing dozens of tribes across the plains. It's not a return to 1850, but it's not nothing either. Communities that were nearly starved into losing their culture's central animal are now the ones leading its recovery, treating the buffalo not as livestock, but as a relative being welcomed home. So back to that field of bones in 1884, it wasn't just a hunting accident or a market gone too far. It was a calculated, if not always coordinated strategy, where wiping out an animal became a way to defeat a people without ever declaring war on them directly. And it worked for a while, but it didn't end the story. Plains nations are still here, and so, slowly, are the buffalo. Every forgotten chapter of history leads to another. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time to join us. Then, click one of the videos on your screen and keep the journey going. I'll see you in the next one.